Precision Markets coach Brian giving you a recap of a NASDAQ 100 trade from last week on February 18th. So let's begin. First and foremost, the first thing we have to do is to be able to get our higher time frame bias and perspective. And so in the higher time frame, what we're looking for, here's our criteria. We're going to look at premium / discount zones. We're going to look at POIs. We're going to look at liquidity, if I could actually spell. And these are some of the things that we're keeping in mind also, but most importantly, market structure. All right. So here's the things that we're going to look at from our higher time frame to give us our bias. So looking at market structure, we have a higher high to a higher low, higher high, and it comes down here into a place where higher low. It looks like we've got some type of reaction. And I really consider this all to be one big range. And so this is an area of interest where we're seeing price has gone in and it's rejected with a small wick and come up with a strong body, but price can still continue to go on, especially with the bearish pressure. This is our precision market structure indicator to help us to be able to help understand market structure, but most importantly, know how to understand market structure for yourself. Indicators are made for us to be able to help us. So also keeping in mind, looks to be some liquidity right here before our POI. So this could be a spot where price goes up from ultimately. But if I look at price from taking our last low to our last high, this is in our range where buys would be more likely from a 4-hour perspective. So let me go ahead and take a look though at our 15-minute time frame and see what we got here. So knowing that buys are more likely to be considered, what I'm looking for is ultimately our chalk from a 15-minute time frame before I take buys in the 4-hour. Now, also with all the things that have been happening in the market, there could be a possibility too that price does end up going up from here, say for instance like this, and comes up and ultimately continues to go down, as we've had a lot of forces that have given us a negative bearish trend on the NASDAQ. So what I want to consider too is both perspectives, because price can either go up or down. Right now on M15, we have price that's continuing going down. I'm looking for it to break here for us to give us a chalk. So I would draw a little line here and say, okay, if it breaks this zone, this would be my chalk area, and I could look for it to take buys. But in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and continue with my sell bias. So I like to use Fibonacci to show us our premium and discount. And so from here, if I go from the last high to the last low, these are our regions area that we're looking at. Now, I try to stay out of relative equilibrium, which is anywhere between 60% to 40%. And so for that, what I'm going to do is draw this POI right here, because this is an area I am watching for to see what happens when price types into it. So I'm going to draw a little zone right here, system 15. And so I really want to see what happens in this area. Not much liquidity before it, but it's still a high probability area. We can also add a second area up here and say this is also an area to watch. And I'm also going to label this M15. And then lastly, our extreme leg right here. All right, so now I'm just going to let price kind of play through, and let's see what we get. Strong wick. It ended up giving us our chalk right here. So let me go ahead and label this. This is our chalk, but I want to see what happens when price comes into one of these areas. So price just barely taps into our area, but let's go ahead and go into the 1 minute and see what we got here. So price has tapped in initially into the area of interest. I'm looking for it to break through right here. I'm gonna label this in yellow. So this is what we look for our chalk. I want to see it break this demand zone. So let's see what we get. Turn on the speed a little bit. All right, so here we have our breakthrough. And a couple areas we could look at is if we look at from this whole little leg, this would be an extreme, A decisional leg I would look at possibly for entry. And then this is also encompassing into this one leg. So essentially the decisional is engulfed by this extreme. And this ultimately would be one big area for me to look at for potential trade entries. But I don't like so much having to have this whole big area. So I really would have it come down, especially if we consider there is some liquidity that tapped into this POI. So I would ultimately look at for half of this POI to see if it taps into the upper half, and from there looking for entry. Now, something I do a little bit different is I also like to combine the power of reversal candlesticks into these trades. And so what I want to see is when the candles get into the zone, I want to see a strong rejection. So here we have a candle that gives me partially a strong rejection that I'm looking for. And what I mean by that is that I want to see the candlestick reversal and confirmation. But knowing that this POI had looked like it almost had been halfway mitigated, I might have not considered to take exactly this entry, especially because we got a bunch of indecision, but I'm looking for a strong movement. So here it looks like price is playing around within this region, but it doesn't look like it's, for instance, I'm getting that strong movement. And so at this point, I would want to stay away from this trade because more than likely we can take it, but it doesn't seem to be high probability at this moment. What it would look like for me is that it would look like strong body, indecision, and then strong movement going the opposite direction. But I'm not seeing that of the sort. So I'm going to go ahead and skip this entry because this one probably will end up being a loss. And as you'll notice, price took time coming back and ultimately gave me long wicks going up, showing, hey, it wasn't ready to go down, and price ultimately goes through and breaks through our POI. So now I have a new area of what I'm looking for potential trade opportunity. Here is our last point of demand that ended up breaking this top right here. So what I'm looking for is price to break through right here, and that will give us complete our chalk. And so we get a breakthrough. So now our new area that we're looking for into is this. I'm looking in this region right here to see that price will end up coming back into this region and rejecting with strong momentum. And so we get strong pushed in, we get a strong wick, which shows indecision. I'm seeing some sellers enter the market. I'm seeing enough for me to consider, hey, this is where I'm going to enter. So I'm going to take my trade in here, but I don't want to be too close to the top. I want to give actually some space because I hate when the market just ends up going through and just barely pierces your POI and then ends up going straight down. So the spread that I consider is about 2 points, but I'm going to actually make it 5 just to give us some space for our trade. So this puts me in an 8.8 stop. I'm going to give it 5 to give us some space. So that gives me a 3.8 stop. Sacrifice a little R, but avoid a couple of different losses that could happen along the way. So we're going to have it go down to here. See, actually, I'll cut it down just a little bit to make it 12.8. And my target that I want to look for ultimately would go to our last lower low. So I'm going to jump to M15. Well, actually not. Here we go, right here. So my target spot I'm looking for is right here. This is ultimately where I want. This is our last lower low. So if we expect price to go, this ultimately would give us about a 1 to 11 risk to reward. And the thing also is that we're going to take partials along the way. So from here, I'm going to take the trade and we're just going to see what happens. Price almost came back and we're taking this out almost. And we got our big drop. So price comes in. And if I remember correctly, this should be almost to a point of 1 to 4 risk to reward. So I take it points off at every 4R instead of 5R because I use a little bit larger stop. So at this point, I'd be taking my partials to take 80% out. So we at least locked in 3R and let the rest run as a runner to go on to our target. So at this point, we're going to say pull here and then say partials taken. Guess what would help if I use black text. Sorry, we got partials taken here. And so now what we're going to do is just let the OS run and see how it ends up working out for us. In fact, let me go back to our 15-minute time frame, and we'll just see how it plays out from here. Price comes back up, doesn't take us out, but ultimately we end up reaching our target. So keeping in mind, guys, the key takeaways from our trades we had from today on NASDAQ, we applied supply and demand theory, waited for proper pricing, waited for our chalk and flip, entered on flip zone, paid us at multiple spots. So these are our key takeaways from our NASDAQ trade. All right. So make sure to take advantage of understanding all the pieces that we combined in. The key, making sure that one thing we'll also forget it was we used market structure to find high probability trades. All right. And if you have any questions for us, definitely reach out. If you haven't joined part of our precision markets community, please do, as we'll have more trade recaps like this, other indicators, other kind of different solutions to help making your trading become at ease and help you to be able to make this a profitable year. Thanks for tuning in and look forward to catching you on our next trade recap.